200 Apache braves remained motionless astride their horses, creating an unbroken formation beyond Tobias Whitfield's weathered barn. Complete silence held the air, no movement, no whispers. They simply waited, in that terrifying stillness. Every homesteader within miles understood that catastrophe had struck. Tobias flattened himself against the barn's rough planks, his rifle shaking in his work-worn grip. Between the wooden slats he glimpsed them with crystal clarity. War paint streaking their faces, razor-sharp spears catching the dawn light, predatory gazes locked onto his homestead. His pulse thundered as one horrifying question dominated his thoughts. Where had Emma gone? His 80-year-old girl had been splashing by the stream while he tended their ailing livestock. Merely 60 minutes had passed. Now she'd vanished completely. And 200 of Kansas Territory's most dreaded warriors encircled his property like guardians. Protecting something holy, the lead warrior descended from his mount with calculated grace. Even at this distance, Tobias observed the elaborate scarification marking the man's torso, the sacred eagle plumes woven through his raven-black hair. How the other braves showed absolute deference to his presence. This wasn't some random attack force. This was a leader who commanded unwavering loyalty. Tobias wiped perspiration from his brow, his thoughts spinning through scenarios. Had they captured Emma? Was this negotiation, or were they simply choosing the perfect moment to incinerate everything he'd constructed? The warrior advanced toward the barn, every stride deliberate and measured. His soft-soled shoes whispered soundlessly across the packed dirt. Behind him, the mounted line stayed frozen like monuments carved from darkness and stone. When the warrior halted 20 feet from the barn entrance, Tobias felt his breathing falter. Those midnight eyes seemed to penetrate the wooden walls, as though he knew precisely where Tobias crouched, exactly how terrorized he was. Then the warrior spoke something that chilled Tobias to his core. His words rang in flawless English, carrying effortlessly through the morning stillness. Tobias Whitfield, I am Standing Eagle of the Mescalero Apache. We must speak. Hearing this warrior speak his name, knowing exactly who he was, sent frost through Tobias's bloodstream. But what horrified him more was Standing Eagle's tone. It held no menace, no fury. Something far more disturbing, it carried respect. Standing Eagle continued, each word measured and precise. Your daughter. Yesterday she performed an action that my people have witnessed from no white child before. Something requiring our acknowledgement. Tobias felt reality shift around him. Whatever Emma had accomplished, whatever innocent error his precious girl had committed, it had somehow captured the attention of one of the territory's most influential Apache chiefs. Now, with 200 warriors under his command, Standing Eagle had arrived to settle that account. But what could an 8-year-old possibly have done to summon this kind of response? And why did Standing Eagle sound like he'd come to celebrate something rather than exact punishment? Tobias's hands trembled as he gripped his weapon tighter. Every survival instinct screamed for him to remain hidden, await the cavalry. Do anything except confront 200 Apache warriors alone. But Standing Eagle's words echoed through his mind something about Emma, something she'd done that demanded their recognition. Drawing a shuddering breath, Tobias emerged from behind the barn. The instant he appeared, every Apache warrior shifted slightly in their saddles, hands drifting closer to their weapons. Yet none drew them. They simply observed, awaiting their leader's command. Standing Eagle examined Tobias with piercing dark eyes, noting his threadbare clothing, his calloused palms, how he held his rifle like someone familiar with its use, but praying he wouldn't need it. When the Apache chief spoke again, his voice carried unexpected gravity. Yesterday at sundown, one of my warriors lay dying beside the creek flowing through your property. Tobias's stomach plummeted. A dying Apache warrior on his land. If territorial officials discovered this, they'd accuse him of harboring enemies. But if he'd refused the warrior shelter, these 200 braves would have come seeking vengeance rather than... Whatever this was, Lone Wolf took bullets from Buffalo Soldiers 3 suns ago. Standing Eagle continued. He crawled great distances, seeking a place to pass with dignity, hidden from his enemy's eyes. He selected the shade beneath your cottonwood grove by the water, the cottonwood trees. Emma's beloved playground where she entertained her dolls. Gathered smooth stones, constructed tiny dwellings from mud and twigs. Tobias's throat constricted as the implications crystallized. "My daughter," he began, but Standing Eagle raised his palm for silence. "Your daughter discovered him there. A small white girl with hair like golden corn silk wearing a blue dress with a torn hem. Standing Eagle's description was exact and unmistakably Emma." Lone Wolf expected her to scream, to flee, to summon men with guns. Instead, double quotes, the Apache leader paused, and momentarily something resembling wonder crossed his weathered features. Instead, she sat beside him, seeing his coldness, his shivering as death approached. She removed the blanket from her small shoulders, a blanket of soft wool, clearly treasured, and covered him with it. Tobias felt the air evacuate his lungs. Emma's blanket, the one her mother had sewn before dying, the one Emma carried everywhere, couldn't sleep without. She had gifted it to a dying Apache warrior. She remained with him, Standing Eagle continued, his voice growing gentler. She held his hand as he entered the spirit realm. She sang to him a white child's lullaby till his breathing ceased. Then she placed wildflowers upon his chest and whispered peace over his form. The implications struck Tobias like a physical assault. His 8-year-old daughter had not only shown mercy to a dying enemy warrior, she had performed what sounded remarkably like Apache burial customs. Without understanding, without grasping the significance of her actions, Emma had honored a warrior's death in ways that would resonate profoundly with his people. Standing Eagle stepped closer, and now Tobias glimpsed something unexpected in the warrior's eyes. Not anger, not threat, but gratitude. No white person has ever shown such respect to one of our dying warriors. Your daughter gave Lone Wolf something more valuable than gold. She offered him dignity in death, comfort in his final moments, and reverence for his spirit. But then Standing Eagle's expression grew solemn again, and Tobias felt ice cascade down his spine. However, there exists a complication, Tobias Whitfield. A complication that brings us here today. The word complication hung in the air like a death sentence. Tobias felt his grip strengthen on the Winchester as his mind raced through terrible possibilities. What kind of complication could Emma's act of mercy have created? What Apache tradition had she unknowingly violated? Standing Eagle seemed to interpret the fear in Tobias's eyes. When we discovered Lone Wolf's body this morning, we also found something that changes everything. The Apache leader reached into a leather pouch at his side and withdrew something that stopped Tobias's heart. Emma's blue hair ribbon, the one her mother had given her, the one she wore daily. But something was wrong with it. Dark stains covered the fabric, stains that looked disturbingly like blood. Your daughter left this beside his body, Standing Eagle said, holding the ribbon up to catch the morning light. But these stains, they are not from Lone Wolf's wounds. Terror flooded through Tobias as the implications became clear. The blood on Emma's ribbon meant she had been injured, possibly severely. His little girl could be lying somewhere wounded or worse. He'd spent the morning hiding in his barn instead of searching for her. "Where is she?" Tobias demanded, stepping forward despite the 200 warriors surrounding them. "Where is my daughter?" Standing Eagle's expression remained unreadable. "That is what we need to discuss. You see, according to Apache law, when someone shows such honor to our dead, they become part of our tribe. Your daughter's actions have bound her to us in ways that white men do not understand." The words hit Tobias like a physical blow. Apache law, tribal bonds. They weren't here to thank Emma for her kindness. They were here to claim her. "She's 8 years old," Tobias said, his voice cracking with desperation. "She doesn't understand your laws or customs. She was just being kind to someone who was suffering, which is precisely why her actions carry such weight." Standing Eagle replied, "Kindness shown without expectation of reward. Compassion given to an enemy without hope of gain. These are the marks of a true Apache heart. By our ancient customs, she now belongs with us, behind Standing Eagle." The 200 mounted warriors remained perfectly still, but Tobias could feel their presence like a weight pressing down on him. These weren't negotiating terms. They were stating facts. In their minds, Emma was already one of them. But there is another complication, Standing Eagle continued, and somehow his tone grew even more serious. The blood on this ribbon tells us that your daughter was injured while caring for Lone Wolf. She may be hurt, possibly badly. We need to find her quickly. The thought of Emma bleeding, scared and alone, sent panic coursing through Tobias's veins. Then let's stop talking and start looking. Every minute we waste here could be no. Standing Eagle's voice cut through his desperation like a blade. You do not understand the situation. If we find your daughter and she is badly injured, the full horror of the situation crashed down on Tobias. Emma was hurt and missing. The Apache wanted to claim her as tribal property, and even if they found her alive, their laws might require them to take her away from him forever. Standing Eagle studied Tobias's anguished face for a long moment before speaking again. However, there is one way this can be resolved differently. One path that honors both Apache law and a father's love. Hope flickered in Tobias's chest. But Standing Eagle's next words extinguished it immediately. You must prove yourself worthy of raising an Apache daughter. You must complete 3 tests that demonstrate you understand our ways, our values, our connection to the spirit world. Only then can you keep the child who has become one of us. Tobias felt the ground shift beneath his feet. 3 tests, Apache trials that could involve anything from combat to spiritual ordeals to impossible quests. And if I refuse, he asked, though he already knew the answer. Standing Eagle's expression grew stone cold. Then we take the girl when we find her. You never see her again. From somewhere in the distance came a sound that made both men freeze the faint. Unmistakable cry of a child calling for help. The child's cry pierced the morning air again, weak and desperate. Both Tobias and Standing Eagle turned toward the sound, which seemed to come from the direction of the old mine shaft about half a mile east of the property. Without thinking, Tobias started running toward the sound. Standing Eagle's iron grip on his arm stopped him cold. Wait, the Apache leader commanded. This could be a trap. Buffalo soldiers have been known to use wounded children as bait, to draw our warriors into ambushes. Tobias stared at him in disbelief. That's my daughter crying? I don't care if it's a trap. I'm not leaving her out there. But Standing Eagle's grip remained firm. If you charge in blindly and get yourself killed, who will complete the tests? Who will prove worthy of raising an Apache daughter? Think like a father, not like a fool. The logic was brutal, but undeniable. If Tobias died trying to reach Emma, she would automatically become Apache property. But every second of delay felt like a betrayal of everything a father should be. Standing Eagle raised his hand, and immediately 20 Apache warriors dismounted and began moving toward the mine shaft in a coordinated pattern. They moved like shadows, disappearing and reappearing behind rocks and scrub brush. Advancing with deadly efficiency, they will secure the area, Standing Eagle explained. If it is safe, we will retrieve your daughter. If it is an ambush, ... He let the implication hang in the air. Tobias watched in amazement as the Apache scouts vanished into the landscape, like they had never existed. These weren't savage raiders as the newspapers portrayed them. They were skilled military tacticians with decades of experience fighting both Mexican and American forces. Within minutes, one of the scouts reappeared and signaled back to Standing Eagle. The Apache leader's expression grew grim. She is there. She is alive, but she is trapped. Relief and terror fought for control in Tobias's chest. Trapped? How? The old mine shaft has partially collapsed. Your daughter fell through rotted boards that covered the entrance. She is approximately 15 feet down, and loose rocks continue to fall around her. Any wrong movement could bring down the entire shaft. The situation was worse than Tobias had imagined. The old mine had been abandoned for years, its wooden supports rotting and unstable. If Emma had fallen through the covering boards, she was now trapped in what was essentially a death trap waiting to collapse. We need ropes. Support something to shore up the shaft walls, Tobias said. his mind racing through rescue possibilities. But Standing Eagle shook his head. There is no time for such preparation. The scouts report that the remaining supports are failing. We have perhaps 20 minutes before the entire structure collapses and buries your daughter alive. The impossible choice crystallized in Tobias's mind. A hasty rescue attempt might trigger a complete cave-in and kill Emma instantly. But waiting for proper equipment would guarantee her death as the mine shaft crumbled around her. Standing Eagle studied Tobias's anguished face, then spoke with quiet intensity. "This is your first test, Tobias Whitfield. Not the test I planned, but the test the spirits have given us. You must choose. Attempt an immediate rescue that risks killing your daughter instantly, or trust Apache methods that you do not understand and may not believe in." "What Apache method?" Tobias demanded. "Our medicine man, Silent Thunder, believes he can speak to the spirits of the mine. Ask them to hold the rock steady long enough for a rescue. But this requires absolute faith. Any doubt, any interference from you, the spirits will not listen." Tobias felt his rational mind rebelling against the suggestion. Spirit communication, talking to rocks. It sounded like superstition, like the kind of primitive beliefs that civilized men had moved beyond. But then Emma's voice drifted up from the mine shaft again, weaker now, more frightened. And Tobias realized he was facing an impossible decision. Trust in Apache spiritual beliefs he didn't understand, or rely on conventional rescue methods that might not work in time. Standing Eagle's dark eyes bored into his. "What is it worth to you, white man? Your daughter's life, or your pride?" If you were in Tobias's position, what would you do? Trust in mysterious Apache spiritual methods you don't believe in, or stick with conventional rescue techniques that might take too long? Tell me in the comments. I need to know which side you'd choose, because what Tobias decided next would determine whether Emma lived or died. In the next 20 minutes, Tobias closed his eyes for a moment, wrestling with everything he'd been taught about science, reason, and civilized thinking. But when he opened them and heard Emma's weak voice calling Daddy from deep in the earth, all his rational beliefs crumbled. "Tell me what to do," he said quietly. Standing Eagle nodded with something. That might have been respect. "First, you must understand, Silent Thunder's not just our medicine man. He worked in these very mines 20 years ago, before the Apache Wars began. He knows every shaft, every support beam, every weak point in this entire mountain." Relief flooded through Tobias. This wasn't just spiritual mysticism. It was practical knowledge combined with Apache beliefs. Silent Thunder actually understood the physical structure of the mine. An elderly Apache man appeared as if from nowhere, his face deeply lined, but his dark eyes sharp and alert. He carried a leather pouch filled with what looked like colored stones and small bones. Without speaking, he knelt at the edge of the mine shaft and began placing the objects in a precise pattern around the opening. He is asking the mountain spirits to hold steady. Standing Eagle, translated as Silent Thunder, began chanting in low, rhythmic Apache. But more importantly, he is listening to the sounds the mine makes, feeling for vibrations that tell him which supports are about to fail. Tobias watched in fascination as Silent Thunder's weathered hands moved over the rocks around the shaft opening. The old man's fingers seemed to read information from tiny shifts in the stone, minute changes in temperature, almost imperceptible vibrations. "Emma," Tobias called down into the darkness. "Can you hear me, sweetheart?" "Daddy," her voice was weak but clear. "I'm scared. My leg hurts really bad and there's rocks falling." Silent Thunder spoke rapidly to Standing Eagle, who translated immediately. "She is on a narrow ledge about 15 feet down. Her left leg appears to be broken, but she is not in immediate danger of falling further. However, the support beam directly above her is cracking. We have perhaps 10 minutes before it fails." 10 minutes. Tobias felt panic clawing at his throat, but he forced himself to stay calm. "What do we do?" "Someone light enough to not trigger a collapse must go down to her," Standing Eagle said. "But they must also be strong enough to lift her out, and they must move with absolute precision. One wrong step, one moment of hesitation, and the entire shaft comes down. Standing Eagle gestured to one of his warriors. A young man who couldn't have weighed more than 140 pounds, but whose lean frame was clearly all muscle. Swift Hawk will make the descent. He has done this before in cave rescues, but Tobias shook his head. No, she's my daughter. She's terrified and hurt. If a stranger tries to grab her, she might panic and move at the wrong moment. It has to be me. You weigh too much, Standing Eagle said bluntly. Your weight will collapse the ledge she's on. Then teach me how to move like you do. I've seen your men disappear into this landscape like ghosts. Show me how to make myself lighter. How to read the mind the way Silent Thunder does. Standing Eagle studied him for a long moment. This is dangerous beyond anything you understand. One mistake. She's my daughter, Tobias interrupted. I won't let her die thinking her father abandoned her. Silent Thunder spoke again, his words urgent. Standing Eagle's translation sent ice through Tobias's veins. The cracking is accelerating. 8 minutes. No more. Without another word, Standing Eagle began stripping off Tobias's heavy boots, his thick belt, anything that added unnecessary weight. Apache method. You become part of the mountain, not something fighting against it. Feel for solid stone before each step. Distribute your weight across the maximum surface area. Move like water, not like a man. He handed Tobias a length of braided leather rope. This will hold your weight and hers together, but only if the anchor points remain stable. Tobias looked down into the dark mouth of the shaft, where his 8-year-old daughter waited in pain and terror. In 8 minutes, the whole thing would collapse. He had one chance to get this right. As he prepared to lower himself into the darkness, Silent Thunder grabbed his arm and spoke directly to him in broken English. Mountain spirits, they test your heart. You go down as white man. You come up as father. Trust the stone. Trust your daughter. Trust Apache way. If you're loving this story and need to see how Tobias saves Emma, make sure to subscribe to the channel because this rescue attempt is about to get even more intense. Tobias took his first step into the mine shaft and immediately felt the entire structure shudder around him. The shudder that ran through the mine shaft felt like the mountain itself was taking a breath. Tobias froze, his bare feet pressed against the wooden ladder rungs. Every muscle in his body tensed as he waited to see if his movement had triggered a collapse above him. Silent Thunder's chanting grew more intense, and somehow, impossibly, the groaning of stressed timber began to quiet. The old medicine man wasn't just performing ritual, he was using sound to monitor the structural integrity of every beam and support in real time, Daddy. Emma's voice drifted up from below, small and frightened. I heard something breaking. I'm coming, sweetheart, Tobias called softly, forcing calm into his voice. Just stay very still for me, okay? Don't move anything except your mouth. He continued his descent, testing each rung before putting his full weight on it. Standing Eagle had been right. Moving like the Apache wasn't just about stealth. It was about understanding the environment around you, feeling for weakness before it could kill you, at 10 feet down. Tobias could finally see Emma in the dim light, filtering from above. She was huddled on a narrow stone ledge, her left leg bent at an unnatural angle. Her face streaked with tears and dirt, but she was alive, conscious, and looking up at him with desperate hope. There's my brave girl, he whispered, continuing his careful descent. You're doing so good, Emma. Just keep being brave for a few more minutes. The wooden support beam directly above her ledge was cracked down the middle. Held together by what looked like nothing more than splinters and prayer, Tobias could see that any significant vibration would snap it completely, sending tons of rock down onto his daughter. When he reached her level, Tobias carefully positioned himself on the same ledge, distributing his weight as evenly as possible. Emma immediately tried to throw her arms around him, but he caught her gently, stopping her movement. Easy, sweetheart. We have to be very careful about how we move. Your leg is hurt, and the mine isn't very stable. Emma nodded, tears streaming down her face. It hurts really bad, Daddy, and I was so scared when the rocks started falling. I thought you wouldn't find me. I will always find you, Tobias said, his voice thick with emotion. No matter where you are, no matter how scared you get, Daddy will always come for you. He began working the rope around both of them, creating a secure harness that would allow them to be pulled up together. But as he tightened the knots, a new sound echoed through the shafts, the distant rumble of approaching horses. Through the opening above, Tobias could hear Standing Eagle shouting orders in Apache. Then the Apache leader's voice called down to him, urgent and strained. Buffalo soldiers approaching. A full cavalry patrol. We have perhaps 3 minutes before they arrive. The implications hit Tobias like a physical blow. If the cavalry found 200 Apache warriors on his property, they would assume an attack was in progress. They would open fire immediately, turning his farm into a battlefield. And if he and Emma were still trapped in the mineshaft when the shooting started, Standing Eagle's voice echoed down again, more urgent now. The soldiers will think we are holding you hostage. They will not negotiate. They will attack. You must come up now. But the rope wasn't properly secured yet. Emma's leg needed to be stabilized for the ascent. And the cracked support beam above them was making new sounds, ominous creaking that suggested imminent failure. From above, Tobias could now hear the thunder of cavalry horses getting closer, along with shouted commands and the metallic sound of weapons being readied for battle. Emma looked up at her father with wide, frightened eyes. "Daddy, what's happening? Why do you look so scared?" Tobias realized they were caught in an impossible situation. If they stayed in the mine to finish the rescue properly, they would be trapped underground when the shooting started above. But if they rushed the ascent with an injured child and unstable supports, they could trigger the collapse that would kill them both, and somewhere above them, 200 Apache warriors were about to face a cavalry charge. While Standing Eagle tried to explain a situation that no army officer would ever believe. The sound of cavalry horses was getting louder, much louder. The cavalry patrol burst into view with military precision. 4 soldiers in blue uniforms, carbines at the ready. Led by a young lieutenant, whose face went white when he saw 200 Apache warriors arranged in perfect formation around the Whitfield farm. From his position 15 feet underground, Tobias could hear everything through the mine shaft opening. The lieutenant's voice cracked with nervous authority as he shouted, "This is Lieutenant Morrison of the 5th Cavalry. Release your hostages immediately, or we will open fire." Standing Eagle's response was calm and measured.
Ow.
But Tobias could hear the tension underneath. "We hold no hostages, soldier. We are here on a matter of honor. It's conducting a rescue. I see 200 armed Apache warriors surrounding a settler's property," Morrison shot back. "That's called a siege." "Where is Tobias Whitfield?" Above them, the cracked support beam groaned ominously. Emma whimpered as small rocks tumbled past their ledge. They were running out of time on multiple fronts. Standing Eagle tried again. "Whitfield is below ground with his injured daughter. We are helping with the rescue. No one has been harmed." But Tobias could hear the skepticism in Morrison's voice. "Apache don't help white settlers, Chief. They raid them. You have 30 seconds to produce Whitfield alive, or my men start shooting." The absurdity of the situation would have been laughable if it weren't so deadly. Standing Eagle was telling the complete truth, but it was a truth so unprecedented that no cavalry officer would believe it. Apache warriors helping rescue a white child. Impossible. Tobias made a desperate decision. "Emma, we're going up now. Hold on to me as tight as you can, but don't move your hurt leg." He began pulling on the rope, signaling to the Apache above to start the ascent. But as they rose from the ledge, Emma's broken leg bumped against the shaft wall. Her cry of pain echoed through the mine. And the vibration was enough. The cracked support beam snapped with a sound like thunder. Rocks began cascading down the shaft as the entire structure started its final collapse. Tobias pulled Emma against his chest and pressed them both against the shaft wall as debris rained around them. The rope jerked upward faster now. The Apache had heard the collapse beginning and were pulling with desperate speed above ground. The sound of the mine collapse convinced Lieutenant Morrison that his worst fears were confirmed. "They're executing the hostages," he shouted. "Open fire!" The crack of 24 carbines firing in unison echoed across the farm. But instead of returning fire, The Apache warriors did something that stopped Morrison's next volley before it could begin. They all dismounted, laid their weapons on the ground, and raised their hands. 200 of the most feared warriors in Kansas Territory had just surrendered without firing a single shot. Morrison stared in disbelief as Standing Eagle walked forward with his hands raised, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Hold your fire. A white man and his child are in that collapsing mine. We are trying to save them." At that moment, Tobias and Emma burst from the mineshaft opening, pulled by Apache ropes just as the entire structure caved in behind them. They rolled across the ground, coughing and covered in dust. But alive Lieutenant Morrison's carbine wavered as he tried to process what he was seeing. The Apache warriors were surrounding a white man and child, but instead of harming them, they were checking for injuries, offering water, treating them like precious cargo. Standing Eagle helped Tobias to his feet, his voice carrying clearly across the farmyard. "Lieutenant Morrison, I present Tobias Whitfield and his daughter Emma. Both alive and unharmed thanks to Apache intervention." Morrison lowered his weapons slowly, confusion replacing aggression on his young face. "I don't understand. Why would Apache warriors risk their lives to save white settlers?" Standing Eagle looked at Emma, who was clinging to her father despite her broken leg, then back at the lieutenant. "Because, soldier, this child showed honor to one of our dying warriors. She gave him dignity in death when she could have simply walked away." The lieutenant's eyes moved from the Apache warriors to the collapsed mine to Tobias and Emma, trying to make sense of a situation that defied everything he'd been taught about Indian relations. But Standing Eagle wasn't finished. However, this rescue was only the first test. According to Apache law, there are still 2 more challenges that Tobias Whitfield must face before this matter is resolved. Morrison's confusion deepened. What kind of challenges? Standing Eagle's dark eyes fixed on Tobias with unmistakable intensity. The kind that will determine whether a white man is worthy of raising an Apache daughter. Lieutenant Morrison looked between the Apache warriors and Tobias with growing bewilderment. "I don't have time for Indian ceremonies. This is United States territory. These Apache need to return to their reservation immediately." But Standing Eagle stepped forward, his voice carrying quiet authority. "Lieutenant, your government recognizes Apache tribal law in matters involving our people. This child became one of us through her actions. The law must be fulfilled." Morrison's hand moved toward his sidearm, but Tobias surprised everyone by speaking up. "Let him finish his tests, Lieutenant. My daughter showed kindness to a dying man, and these warriors risked their lives to save her from that mine. The least I can do is hear them out." Standing Eagle nodded with respect. "The second test is this. You must demonstrate that you understand the value of sacrifice. When your daughter gave her blanket to Lone Wolf, she sacrificed her most precious possession for someone else's comfort. Can you do the same?" Tobias frowned. "What do you want me to sacrifice?" "This farm. This land that you have worked so hard to build. Sign it over to the Apache. We will know that you truly understand what your daughter did." The request hit Tobias like a physical blow. This farm was everything: his livelihood, his future, Emma's inheritance. It represented years of backbreaking work, every dollar he'd ever saved, every dream he'd built for his daughter's future. Lieutenant Morrison stepped forward angrily. "Now see here, you can't just demand someone's property." But Tobias was staring at Emma, who was watching him with absolute trust, despite her pain. She had given away her most treasured possession without a second thought. Could he do any less? "If I sign over the farm," Tobias said slowly, "where will Emma and I live? How will I provide for her?" Standing Eagle's expression revealed nothing. "That is not our concern. You asked to prove yourself worthy. This is the price." The farmyard fell silent, except for the wind rustling through the cottonwood trees. 200 Apache warriors watched. 24 cavalry soldiers waited. And Emma looked up at her father with complete faith that he would make the right choice. Tobias closed his eyes, thinking of his wife's dreams for this place, of the years he'd spent building something lasting. Then he opened them and looked at his daughter alive, safe, and trusting him completely. Where do I sign? Standing Eagle studied him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He smiled. You do not sign anything, Tobias Whitfield? This was the test, not whether you would sacrifice your property, whether you would choose your daughter's honor over your own comfort. You have passed. Relief flooded through Tobias. Standing Eagle wasn't finished. The third test is the simplest, but perhaps the hardest. You must accept that your daughter is now part of two worlds, white and Apache. You must promise to teach her both ways, to honor both sides of who she has become. Can you do this? Tobias looked down at Emma, who had shown more wisdom and courage in 8 years than most adults managed in a lifetime. I promise. Standing Eagle reached into his pouch and withdrew something that made Emma gasp with joy. Her blue wool blanket, cleaned and mended, but unmistakably hers. Lone Wolf's spirit whispered to us where to find this. He wanted your daughter to have it back, with his gratitude for her kindness. As Emma clutched her blanket with tears of happiness, Standing Eagle turned to address both the cavalry and his own warriors. Let this day be remembered. A white child showed us that honor and compassion know no boundaries of race or tribe, and a white father proved himself worthy of raising an Apache daughter. One by one, the Apache warriors mounted their horses. Before leaving, Standing Eagle placed his hand on Emma's head in blessing, then clasped Tobias's arm in respect. When she is older, she will be welcome in any Apache camp. She has earned that right through her actions, and you have earned the right to guide her there. As the Apache warriors rode away and the cavalry prepared to follow, Lieutenant Morrison shook his head in amazement. In 20 years of frontier service, I've never seen anything like this. Tobias sat beside Emma as the sunset painted the sky orange and red, holding his daughter close as she clutched her returned blanket. Daddy, she said quietly, I didn't know giving someone a blanket could cause so much trouble. Tobias smiled, stroking her corn silk hair. Sometimes, sweetheart, the most important things we do seem like the smallest things at the time. You showed kindness to someone who needed it, and that changed everything. Emma Whitfield grew up to become one of the most respected teachers in Kansas Territory, fluent in both English and Apache, bridging to worlds that had seemed impossible to connect. She never forgot the lesson that a simple act of kindness could transform enemies into allies. Tobias never remarried, devoting his life to raising his remarkable daughter and honoring the Apache wisdom that had saved them both. His farm became a place where settlers and Apache could meet in peace, a testament to what understanding could accomplish. Standing Eagle kept his word. Emma was always welcome in Apache camps, where she learned traditional crafts and stories. When she married years later, warriors from his tribe attended her wedding, honoring the child who had shown them that courage and compassion could flourish in any heart. The blanket Emma had given to Lone Wolf became a symbol passed down through generations, reminding all who heard the story that true honor knows no boundaries of race, age, or circumstance. If you loved this incredible story of courage and compassion, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales from the Old West. Click on the video on the screen to hear a story even better than this one, with courage so powerful and a twist